This morning I have a very little amount of time. It's going to be split with a lot of honey-do stuff because basically this time of year we become semi-farmers. But there's still a few little details I wanted to work on, and I wanted to go over why I want to do this. It doesn't seem like it would be a big deal, but for me, little details make all the difference. So the little project I want to work on today, I have time and it's raining out there, so it doesn't even matter if I get this done today, or I just lay it out and I'll say I don't like it. See, I don't know if I'm going to like it or not. I bought some material at Lowe's that'll go inside the fairing that I can cover this part of the engine, and I can have this stripe. Now you wouldn't think that would be a big deal, but because that stripe is missing, it's like having a tooth missing in the middle of your mouth. From certain views and angles, that really looks objectionable to me, and I want to try to correct it. Now the whole thing, whenever you're trying to make little changes to a bike, there's a golden rule, is try to do it in such a way that if after you ride the bike or after you see how it looks, you can always put it back to stock without a big problem. And every one of my bikes has at least half a dozen or so what I call these custom little parts that are there. Of course, all these things are in the eye of the beholder, but I try to, at all possible. Oh, and here's just the best example of all. Yes, the exhaust system. I just was thinking about this. The exhaust system, anytime I want, it's a matter of about a half an hour, I can put the stock exhaust back on for whatever reason. But always the idea is not to do something you can't undo if you don't like it later on. For me, one of the things I experimented with years and years ago, maybe 5 years ago, when I first bought the R1, I wanted different seats. And I wound up, they're in a closet here, I don't know if I can see them. I made 6 of them. Anyway, no point even digging them out. They're all on the previous videos. I made some a little higher, some with more of a curve, some with no curve, some with double padding. And I found out the one I liked the best was the stock seat with some of the material removed, so it was a little bit lower. And I had to make this little carbon fiber part to fill in the gap. Because one of the things you can do on an R1, there's a way you can, and I've made a little bracket, you can raise the front of the seat up. On an R1, you're always sliding forward. It's annoying. I had to make this from scratch, that little carbon fiber filler piece. And sometimes it's just a little piece like that that changes the whole look of the bike. Or a seat that'll change the whole feel of the bike, or in my case, not having clip-ons, having more comfortable bars, it just changes, the whole bike changes very quickly. Now this bike has a lot of modifications. A lot of modifications, they don't seem that big. They're small until you stand back or take a picture of a motorcycle and you say, ooh, that really looks a lot nicer. Now on the 650, I made so many little changes. Most of them, the tail tidy, the lower fairing changes, most of the things that I changed, I took an example is this part and this part, by painting them gloss black instead of flat black, the whole bike looked longer and sleeker. Polishing those parts, they were painted. All these little things, none of them cost a lot of money, none of them take a lot of time, and you already have the parts. You don't even have to buy the parts. It just requires a little decision of what you want to do. Another example, polishing the titanium exhaust. Every time I do one of these little modifications, I think, wow, why didn't the factory do that? And then I think, well, because it takes time and effort to do it. Painting the mirrors. Having shiny mirrors instead of flat black mirrors. Another all little things that, well, these parts on the R1 were very hard to mold, make. That's super labor intensive, but a lot of the things like making this little part today, relatively straightforward, relatively simple. So the decision is you have to decide what part you want to change, and then if you can change it and then not like it, go back or just unbolt the part or take it off. And we're still waiting. It's probably going to be about 3 more weeks. We still have a dented up muffler on this, but we're still able to ride the bike. And hey, we had a great ride yesterday up to Lake Denmark. If you've never been up on that road, that's a good one. So before I make a pattern, for the concerns I have, I bought very thin aluminum material. Right here I think there might be an interference fit. I don't know. I may have to put a washer under that back fairing shim, the fairing, to move the fairing away. I'm going to have to look that up here. No, there's no clearance issue in there. I got to check the other side. But the first step on this whole thing is going to be to make a very accurate pattern for each side. Now the whole idea of this is to make this part and make it that I can somehow, if I don't like it, or if it were to interfere with airflow too much or whatever, I can always go back and undo it. But by connecting that stripe, just having that little piece, I think from an artistic point of view, it's going to change the whole look of the bike. And I've looked at this. I have over 300 pictures of it from every angle you can imagine, and making that stripe connect would be really nice. Now why didn't I, you would think, just move the stripe up and I wouldn't have to, maybe I could move that stripe forward. Well, it turns out I tried all of the things I thought were going to make this better, and in the end I wanted to lay this out because this stripe defines the motorcycle. And I thought, well, I'll just have to live with that. I never thought about filling that in. But now that it's done, I wouldn't want to have filled it in permanently that I couldn't take that little piece out. So that's going to be a little trickier than you think it is. But the first thing is to make up the patterns. Have your coffee, feed the fish, and make the patterns. It's a rainy morning. And usually when it rains like this, the fish go underwater so they don't get wet. Little by little, all our farming efforts are coming together. And because it's raining out, you probably won't see how beautiful this wisteria in the next day or so will be totally filled out. It's about at 70% bloom right now. Really adds a nice look to the backyard. Every day I like to start my day off just a little different. Figure out what I want to do in terms of motorcycles. Figure out what the honey-do list is. Figure out how much food the fish want to eat. Now, as many pictures as I have of the FZR, this is the little spot. By making this little triangle-shaped piece of sheet metal, and if I can make it removable, that'll be the best of all worlds. And then, of course, have to wait till it stops raining to put some paint and primer on it and try to make it have a nice shiny finish. So from a lot of angles it'll just look like that's part of the permanent motorcycle. Then if there's some reason I want to take it off, I'll just be able to remove it. So the parts I need, this is a sheet of 025 aluminum. I made a temporary just to see if this would fit, and of course it fits fine. So what I'm going to basically try to do here, and I trying to make this simple as possible, is I can take this piece here, step one, so that it's drying. I could just roughly sand one side with probably some 400 or 600 grit and prime that as the first step, so that primer is drying while I'm making up the pattern. But that would save me a little bit of time. Now what I'm going to do is just take some straight, simple green, some 400 sandpaper, just to put a little bit of an etch on this. Now because the heat is still on in the house, and it's been getting cold in the evening, it's been up in the 50s and 60s, but we still have the heat on. I'll put this over by the heat. It'll dry really quickly, I'm sure. Now what I thought too is I can make these parts, because of the way they lay out, one of the little things I can do is I can paint this sheet before I actually have to cut the parts. This part will cut. I have tin snips, probably even cut it with old scissors, and you're not going to see any of the cuts. So the way I'll lay this out is I'll lay the stripe along one edge. Once the primer dries, I'll get an accurate reading on that, and then I can lay out the parts. So this edge will be the edge that you're going to see. So what I ought to do is, because paint usually has a tendency to come off the edge. We don't know which edge we're going to use yet. We may as well just do them both. And many times in the old days when I would be doing what I thought was going to be some super modification, I'd cut something or chop something or whatever, and then I couldn't put it back conveniently, learned a hard lesson. Always good to be able to put it back if you can engineer your changes up that way. It's such an important thing. In this case, it's a little thing. It's probably not many people are even going to notice this except me. You know, I can't go outside. It's still raining, so I'm going to try to paint right in the hallway here if I can. A part this small, I should be able to airbrush, so. But I'll get this drying while I'm making a pattern up. The primer is going to hopefully act as glue, get the edges. And once I have this painted, I can then just trim the final part out. Alright, so by that being up by the heating vent, that'll dry in less than an hour. Get that nice and dry. By the way, this is a big fake out. This box came the other day and Karen ran down and yelled me, "Hey, your muffler's here, wow!" And I look and it's not, it's a weed whacker for the garden. So, it's my new Ryobi weed whacker. But I'd rather have the muffler, to be honest. And we got several little parts left to paint these. I wanted to have them in stock. I got Glenn's part. I don't want to do that on a rainy day. That's a job we need to be able to paint outside on. But we're closing in on having some of the things that eventually, I hope, very soon, this work table will be empty. Which is now the coming down a home stretch here for this year. And so some of the things I need to make my pattern, I can use the old pattern. Take all my tape and some cardboard. I want to come back with accurate patterns. Now obviously I'd like to have this as accurate as possible. So I can just start off by roughing this out. Roughing out the piece of cardboard that I need. So once I can cut this out, then I can try to test fit it in and line up that first stripe. Now with the piece of cardboard roughed out, the important thing is going to be to line up the stripe more than anything else. So this stripe, which would mean from here to here, lines up. And then this is the actual piece of the metal. So that's the actual part, and this is going to be the left side. So now what I did, I put some tape just so I could simulate the white stripe. I don't have any white tape, and get an idea of if we have any interference fits, that might be a problem. There's nothing back there. Nothing up here would be a problem. Down there is nothing. Actually, what I may be able to do is use some 5-minute epoxy to hold that in place. And see, the nice thing about 5-minute epoxy, if I ever want to take it off, an ordinary hairdryer will soften it up enough that you can take it off. But I would like to come up with some way of attaching it that it's easy to take off. All right, so we have the first part of it. I got to replicate it for the other side, and we're all set to go. Now, the right and the left side are totally different, so I have to be careful, just like in modeling, not to make two left hands or two right hands. Now, what's going to be critical is the thickness of this stripe. I'm going to do this with actually measure it very accurately. Because there's no, what I didn't realize, there's no clearance back here, so I may have to resort to gluing that part on. Boy, that's not the first choice, but I may have to do that because we're always limited when you're doing this kind of stuff. You never have all the choices. But here's the thing I like about this. First of all, it costs no money to do this. Everything I have is already in-house. The material is just a few bucks. But here's what's really nice about it. It's going to add a real positive look to this part of the stripe, and that stripe is the defining part of the motorcycle. And even when I reviewed the video from yesterday, the ride video, boy, as the bike comes at you, you can really see that stripe. You can see that from outer space. So the more we can accent it, the better I think it's going to look. Anyway, this is just an artistic thing, and there's still enough air here. I'm sure this is not going to overheat. This bike never even comes close to overheating. Now, it may seem like this is overkill, but it really isn't. And let me explain why. These stripes, each one as it goes to the back of the motorcycle, gets incrementally thicker. This gets thicker as well as the black, or else it wouldn't stay proportional. And it's all, I did it all without a ruler, by mind's eye, just looking at it. So what I want to do, in other words, I don't have a piece of tape this thickness. So I want to make sure I get an accurate right to 85 thousandths. Okay. So obviously I don't have any tape 85 thousandths. I can't measure down there conveniently. Make sure I'm at 90 degrees. It's 85 thousandths. I have to, when I lay out that stripe, it's got to be 85 thousandths. And all of these bikes, it's just little details and measuring things, making sure everything's accurate. On this paint job, when I laid this out to make sure this stripe all coordinated, make sure that all married up. When it's all done, it looks real easy, but there's a lot of measuring and figuring out, and I don't know, it takes a lot of time to do it. All right, next step on this, just put the black on, and that's going to have to dry. Still raining out there, so I'm forced to do this. Now as that's drying under a heating vent, and we'll let that dry a couple hours, we have some honeydew stuff to do today in the rain. It'd be a good day to get some of these things done, and then come back and work on this afternoon. Now we're in the middle of the flowering tree season here in Rutherford. I love it. Off to do the honeydew list. Look, here's another one coming up here. And for about a month every year, there's so many of these trees are beautiful. Look at the purples and pinks, and wow. Time to do honeydews.
A red bud, I'm sorry.
Now what's that? What variety is that?
It's a red bud.
And what are these pink ones up here?
Oh, there's a crab apple tree, I'm not sure.
Boy, they're everywhere. Really nice.
And this one coming up is a dogwood, a white.
Now tomorrow we're going to our friend's retirement party down the shore. They retired down the Jersey Shore, and Karen made this oil painting for them that is going to be a little gift. Congratulations to Steph and Jim on their retirement. And part of my retirement is having an extra cup of coffee today. Oh my God, it's raining, it's not raining. Painting really did come out nice. Karen's quite an artist. So while it's raining out there, and we're going to have to live through a day, I guess. It doesn't look like it's going to get any better. I thought one of the things I could do here, and this is going to be up to Glenn to make a final decision, I can get the repair on this done. The repair is he wants to take his name off the bike so it would be easier to sell. And, well, we can do that. That's no problem. But I'm cleaning this off with Simple Green. And what he decided to do, I guess we decided, I'm not sure, we're going to just cover it up. Now there was a time, if you look back on the videos, I'm going to try to put some of that video on in the future, when Glenn was doing a buffing demo over here, and he had some really cool products. It was a great little demo. Anyway, we got to figure out how we want to backmask this. I'm going to have to get some tape and just come up with some ideas here. And then backmask everything with tin foil. Paint the blue first, and I probably could airbrush that today even while it's raining. Then that's got to dry overnight, and I have to backmask and paint the white. So this will be not a 5-minute job, that's for sure. And then Glenn is going to have to decide if he wants to, he's going to have to sand the whole thing down with 1000 grit. I don't know if he wants to sand out all this buffed out surface, or if he'll just be happy with that. We'll let him look at it and decide. But we can probably get this masked out while our other project is drying. And that's always a big part of what I try to share with people. I try to do things as efficiently as possible, and a lot of people seem able to pick up some good tips from that. Now, as I'm laying this tape out, the idea is to keep this area looking like it's part of the original paint job. I don't want to make too much of it white or it turns into a white motorcycle. And I've gone back and forth with several choices here until I actually decide what's going to look the best. I'm not sure here, but that's why we buy extra tape. Now, this would have been convenient if Glenn had this day off work or whatever. Well, anyway, this is the kind of job you don't really have all the choices on, but I'm going to try to obviously make it symmetrical. Then we have to sand out that name, see if we have it close on both sides, and we can do this just by measuring and seeing which side is higher or lower, looking at it from several angles until we're happy with it. Now, I put a lot of time into this, and you're probably thinking, why not just make a paper pattern? Well, because you're going around a curved surface, this pattern is not going to really be as accurate as you think it is. What I did, I lined this up to see where the point would be, and the point is equal. In the back, we're 1/4 of an inch away. I lined up where the point goes down at its thickest point, and we're right at symmetrical. And at the back, so the only thing we're dealing with is this curve here, and I've laid it out 3 or 4 different times. I think we're pretty close. And I try to look at it from the top, from the bottom. But this is the thing that's nice if you have the bike owner here, like when Mark's here putting his decals on, or Glenn's, because the owner of the bike, sometimes my vision of what looks good and their vision is not exactly the same. But anyway, we're going to basically back mask off the whole everything except this right now with tinfoil. A lot of times when you're doing this kind of a job, it starts out being, you think you're going to be done in an hour or 2. It winds up really consuming a lot of time. This, I think, is going to be one of them. That it's a lot more of a job than you think it is to do something like this. It's just time consuming because you've got to get it symmetrical, or as symmetrical as possible, or you've got to in some way go back and forth 100 times until you're happy with it. But the whole idea here will be to have everything covered with aluminum except this spot here that we're going to sand out and try to get that name flat. It's not really flat in a lot of spots, so that in itself is going to be a little challenging. Now I have some 400 sandpaper here. I'm going to sand this dry because I really want to level it out as much as possible. Now luckily I do have some of this blue and I do have some white, so I don't need to worry about the paint. I'm probably not going to have enough clear at the end of this if he wants to do the whole fairing. I don't know. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But right now, the idea right here is going to be to get this blue. I'll load up the airbrush with the blue. Paint this the darker blue that is the outline. Now I really would like to do it the other way around and paint this white, but I'm just afraid it's going to be more complicated to do it that way. The easier of the two things is to do it this way, because I don't know how we're going to be able to make these letters disappear. See, I think the 400 sandpaper may make this disappear. I don't know. We're going to find out. Getting it flat because there is a decal thickness in there. So I'm just going to have to keep sanding until I see, and we're of course sanding away coats of clear here. So that's another issue. But doing all these little repairs like this is tricky stuff. Can be more challenging than you think. It looks easy when you see it all done, and you think, oh my God. I always love when you watch Bitchin' Rides and a guy brings in a pearlescent chrome gold car, and he says, oh, I just need a little touch-up. A guy dropped his watch on it or chipped it or something. Well, yeah, a lot of times that's a really challenging thing. And it's the equivalent of having a beautiful steak and you drop it in the mud that sometimes it just isn't your best friend. Anyway. Now I'm doing it by feel. Yeah, you can still feel it, and I'm afraid if I go sanding down here, I'm never going to get that to I'm going to just have to block sand this edge a little bit. Well, this just gets to be tricky. And we'll see. Time consuming. It's always about how much time you're willing to spend. It's never about, it's never just a, like in other things where you could just go buy it. See, that's the challenge, and that's the beauty of paint. You've got to kind of do it yourself, or you've got to really have a vision of what you want. It's what attracts me to doing these paint jobs, because it just isn't easy. If it was easy, yeah, it would be a whole different thing. Okay, that's cool enough. I'll do the other side, and we'll be ready to airbrush this. Now this side is even more. I don't know what happens. This decal is actually thicker, or the clear when we buffed this, or when Glenn buffed it. Let's blame him. He's not here. It's always the best scenario. Anyway, to flatten this out. Now, I don't want to go so far down into the clear that I get into the decal, because then I'm going to have a scar, and I'm going to have to then do what amounts to be an extensive bodywork repair. So I'm walking on thin ice here, moving a sandpaper 90 degrees, trying to get it that I don't see any shiny spots. And now I'm going to try not to prime this. The reason is I don't want to have this paint edge be so thick when I'm done, because maybe Glenn will not want to clear the whole part, or we don't know that yet. When we pull the tape up, we'll see, and we'll make a decision then. But that certainly adds, 20 hours of work to it if we have to sand the whole fairing down. So anyway, I'm hoping this is going to be a good enough repair that this will allow him to sell a bike or keep it if he's going. It's a track bike, so but it's still, it was a bike we dedicated to Larry when Larry passed. So it was Larry's bike, it was Luciano's bike, it was Glenn's bike, and it will maybe be somebody else's bike. And if you're interested in this for a track bike, you certainly can contact Glenn. His website is his channel is GLENN. Easy to remember. So here we go. Now, I don't know if we're down. Yeah, I don't want to get too cute. See, the problem with some of these things, you just get too cute and you make 20 hours of work where nobody will ever notice it if you didn't do it. All right, I'm going to mix up some paint in the airbrush. Luckily, I do have a little bit of that dark blue left. And it's totally pouring outside as we build up the compressor. I thought we'd catch a break. No break. So what I'm going to have to do is figure out some way to do it right in the doorway here with the airbrush. Now it's really lucky for Glenn. We have the original jar when we did the original paint job, and it looks like there'll definitely be enough paint to do this, I hope. Anyway, we won't squander it. The idea we're using the airbrush is to get thinner paint edges, get it to flow on better, and I want to airbrush. Now, several people I know have bought the Harbor Freight one for $15. Nobody's reported into me or given me one. Give me one and I'll test it. As long as my Iwata's running, the Iwata is hard to beat. This is really a high quality unit. And the last thing here is just to tack rag the area down. Make sure the tape edges are pressed down pretty good. And this looks like it's going to require 3 or 4 or maybe more coats. I don't know how many. But I don't want to get on so much thinner that I run the risk of getting down there and loosening up the paint. So now while that first coat is drying, and of course it's still pouring rain out there, it's just horrible. So I think we're going to be limited today into what we can get done. But I'd want to give that at least 20 minutes to dry before I put the next coat on. And in the meantime, I can work on my parts. I'm trying to be efficient and bounce back and forth. While one thing's drying, I'm working on something else. That's how I get some efficiency out of the day. Okay, so we have our material. We have 2 coats of black on there. They're dry. It looks like that's going to be fine. Now, I wanted to lay out, these are the 2 patterns I made. And of course, this edge I would want to butt up against here. That would make sense. And it's important not to do this, to make one left and one right, to get to both of them. So I don't have to work on that side. Right here I can start off this way. See how I can lay these out to, so I'll have a piece of material left over just in case. And I always plan on just in case. Now, if I lay these out this way, it won't matter which is which. But if I do it this way, then I can mark on the back which is which side. And that'll just make it easier. And I can leave a little bit of space so I can get in there with the cutter. It looks like maybe I could even do 2 sets if I had to. Yeah, the material's cheap enough. I don't even have to worry. This is not a... what I thought of doing is using a gallon can, too thin. And this material I went through at Lowe's, by the way, and they have several different thicknesses. And I had a stop sign. I thought the stop sign's going to be too thick where I have clearance issues. So anyway, what I'll do is this. We're going to see how this material cuts. Take a Sharpie marker. This edge you're not going to see, and I left it purposely plenty oversized. So, you know, a day like today where we can work on 2 things at the same time, we get a lot of efficiency that way. Since this is going to be the back and you're not going to see it, this will be the right side. And I can just save the pattern. This will be, I had thought about making this out of a sheet of carbon fiber. I do have some carbon fiber sheet, but there's no reason to, because it's going to get painted and you're not really going to see it. So this would probably be fine. And as I'm thinking about how I'm going to install these, I'm thinking it's going to be the only game in town is going to be the 5-minute epoxy that I can melt out of there at a low temperature if I decide to change my mind. Okay, then this will be the left side. Again, we may not even use these parts. It may be that what's going to happen is that I don't like the way it looks, or even worse, if Karen doesn't like the way it looks. But anyway, okay, so now we know we have because we laid these out, we know we do have a left side and a right side. We don't have 2 rights, and if you've ever built a model plane, you know how easy it is to make 2 fuselage sides the same, 2 motor mounts the same. So let's hope we've ducked that bullet. Okay. Oh, we're ready. I'm ready. We're ready. Now I do have aircraft tin snips, but I found out this material, it takes a little bit of effort on it. This is an old pair of scissors, and once you cut a little bit, you want to get that material up out of the way, or in this case, just get rid of it. Since we're not going to see this edge, I'll just dress it off so I don't. It's sharp, I don't want to cut myself. But you basically, when you're done, just use an old pair of scissors and that should be fine. Now one thing I can keep in mind here is this is really sharp. Anytime you cut with shears or scissors, always good to dress it off. Whoa, listen to that thunder outside. Whoa. It's Thunder Road out there. How about bouncing back and forth here during our big thunderstorm? Holy mackerel. I'm trying to put this on light and with as little thinner as possible. I don't want to build up a really super thick paint edge if I can help it. That's what's good about using an airbrush. Now this is a part of it that I have to get exactly right. This is the left side. The left side. Okay. So I know that I have, and it would sound like this might be overkill. It's not overkill. I've got to get this stripe 98. Because I did this, it's not in equal amounts of tape. It's not equal in any way. Let me get a razor blade. This is how I thought I might lay this out, is just do it this way. Put a tiny scratch on here, which you won't even see. And now I can come down here and do the same thing down here. 98, 98. Now I have to backmask this with 1/8 inch tape. And I want to make sure, since this is fresh paint, it's been drying a few hours, so it should be no problem. I want to get it right on that money. And that's my tape edge. Now, before I go any further, it's nice today that we're getting to work on Glenn's stuff. Even though I know he's not riding a bike or whatever, that I would like to get it done for him. Okay, 98, 98, 98, 98, 98, 98. Because if this stripe, when it goes into the fairing, if it's really not going to look the way I want it to look anyway. So now I have that edge. Now I can take my backmasking tape that I'm going to use. I'm going to get some tin foil, and because this is fresh paint, I'll take this up against my shirt. And when I leave the backmasking out here, I may as well show it. You never go wrong when you show things in real time instead of the fewer camera cuts you can make, of course, the better. Okay, so now, and I only have to show one side here, of course. I can take this tape, rub it up on my shirt 2 or 3 times. I only want to leave about 1/8 of an inch sticking out. I don't want a lot of the tape touching the black paint if possible. And actually, this will be good. This will give me something to hold on to here while we're painting it. Let me just get this out of the way. Now, I'm going to set the airbrush up to airbrush white. Now, the point is today, because it's raining, I can airbrush this. I cannot shoot clear. I don't shoot clear in the house ever. So here's, if I can get, it's going to need 3 or 4 coats of white, 20 minutes, half hour apart. Then by putting this aside to dry, Glenn's part is dry and it has to dry overnight. This will be ready to dry overnight. I think I've really gotten a lot of bang for my buck today, especially because it's a rainy day. It's probably the last thing we're going to get painted today, but I think for a rainy day that you never know where this is all going to wind up anyway. Always an adventure. And I think this little part is going to add a little touch to the bike that, well, if it doesn't, it's coming right off, that's for sure. But you never know unless you give it a try. You never know what you can, all these little design things. Between Karen's artwork and her paintings, and I try to fool around with this stuff, there's always something going on in this house. So today we did get a lot of stuff done, considering how crappy the weather was. But of course this week, we had a really nice week with the FZR. The lowering links worked out great. Glenn's job here, where the next day we're going to do the white on this. I want to get this part done, and then he'll have to make a decision about the clear. See, the choices that we have right now, once this is repaired, he could resand the whole part, and we'll need another gallon of clear. We could put 5 more coats of clear on this. I don't know if he wants to do that and do all that wet sanding in between. But anyway, but this part of it is pretty much going to be done in the next couple days. So, and I don't know if he's got anybody looking to buy the bike. Again, it's all mystery meat to me. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.
Bye.